Hold up. You think I can teach you how to play EVE Online? This game is huge. I don't think anyone knows how to play it. You know what? This video's title was a lie. This isn't how to play EVE Online. This is how not to be totally incompetent at EVE Online and become equipped with the knowledge and resources needed to learn the rest of the game. But I think you can see why I went with the first title. Anyway, you can call me Ezekiel. This is how to play EVE Online. Let's jump in. So, how to describe this game? Well, if I could do it through a song, it would probably be...
See! Jews in space!
Wir Jews are in space. We're zooming along, protecting the Hebrew race.
Well, that wasn't very helpful. You know what? Let's start at the beginning. Like any self-respecting MMO, you begin EVE Online by creating your character. The first option is your empire. This choice doesn't affect gameplay. Your options are the Gallente Federation. Their shtick is letting the market do its thing so long as nothing illegal happens. Next are the Caldari, who thought that the market still wasn't free enough, so they broke away from the Gallente to form their own empire. Although they seem to have ended up with a bit of a corporate oligarchy thing going on, which kinda makes the market less free, but whatever. Anyway, the lore also describes the Caldari as being extremely militaristic. Next are the Amar. They're the biggest empire, mostly because they got a head start on inventing space travel. They used this head start to enslave every inhabited planet they could find. This means that the Amar feature a largely slave-driven economy. The government itself is extremely religious, with the emperor being both the head of state and head of the church. Last are the Minmatar. They're naughty slaves who need to return to their rightful Amarian masters. Their government claims to be a republic, but the lore says that they have a strong emphasis on tribal loyalties, so if Paradox games have taught me anything, then it's really a tribal confederacy. Next, you pick your bloodline. This just affects how your character looks. Speaking of which, don't forget to make your character look like an abomination. Last, pick your background and education. These don't do anything other than let you brag about your obscure pedigree and degree in a field no one's heard of. After the requisite amount of bragging, you're ready to start playing EVE. The first thing to do is to play the tutorial. It'll teach you the controls. You'll notice that they're mostly centered around drop-down menus and lists. This can be a bit odd at first, but you'll get used to it. The controls aren't the only thing that's odd. After all, you just spent all this time creating a perfect abomination, and all you get to see of it is a tiny little picture on the top of the screen. What gives? The truth is, you don't really play as a person in EVE Online. You play as a ship. The character you created is just the pilot, or as the game insists on calling it, the Capsuleer. This doesn't mean that your character is useless. Far from it. Your character has skills that pass on to the ships they're commanding. Skills most often apply a flat bonus to your stats, but it's also common for bigger and fancier ships and modules to have skill requirements. To get a new skill, you buy its skill book and train it up to level 1. The process of training a skill is easy. You just put it in the training queue and wait. Skills go up to level 5, with higher levels taking more time to train. There are two easy ways to get skills to train faster. First is messing with attributes. I'm not going to get into that because you really shouldn't mess with them unless you know what you're doing. The other option is to buy a subscription. I'm going to guess that a lot of you got into EVE based on the understanding that it's free to play. While this is technically true, it's also not. You see, EVE Online is an MMO. Back in the day, that meant subscription only. But today, people want stuff for free. So now you have two options. A free alpha account or a subscribed beta account. Omega account. With an alpha account, you have access to most skills, but they can't all be trained up to level 5. Alphas also train their skills at half the rate of Omegas, and their queues can't include skills that start training in more than 24 hours. Finally, as an alpha, you're limited to training up to 5 million skill points. Overall, alphas aren't too far behind their subscribed counterparts, but subscribed players have a definite advantage. By the way, everything covered in this video is fully applicable to both free and paying players. So now that we have a functional pilot, let's get him a ship. This game has a lot of ships. Ships belong to factions, which mostly determines how they look, but ships from the same faction tend to share their tactical philosophies too. I'm going to cover the ships from the 4 main factions, but remember that these rosters are massive, so there are many exceptions to what I'm about to say. First are the Gallente ships. They like to fight either from a distance with drones, or up close and personal with hybrid weapons. Hybrid weapons basically fire traditional ammunition propelled by lasers. For defense, they usually use armor. In terms of looks, Gallente ships are sleek and ergonomic. They're also asymmetrical, which will either give them a unique look or drive you crazy. Next are the Caldari. They love missiles, but they also use hybrid weapons. For defense, they prefer to use shields. When it comes to how they look, Caldari ships are highly utilitarian. This is the Amarr roster. They dish out damage using lasers, and defend themselves with some of the heaviest armor in the game. The Amarr also like to use drones, but the Gallente tend to be better at that. However, in the end, none of that matters since Amarr ships have a unique advantage, one that puts them miles ahead of their competition. Every Amarr ship is covered in gold. Combined with a sweet church aesthetic, most of these ships wouldn't look out of place in 40k. Last are the Minmatar. They fight using traditional projectile weapons, and defend themselves with a mix of shields and speed. Their ships have a very scrapyard look going on, with exteriors appearing quite rusted. Once again, there are a lot of exceptions to what I just said, so if you want to figure out what an individual ship does, just look at its bonuses. Each ship can have a roll bonus and a skill bonus. The roll bonus is applied up front, but the skill bonus is applied in proportion to the pilot's level in the listed skill. When you finally choose a ship, you need to get it some guns. Fitting ships in this game can be a lot of fun. There are all sorts of crazy designs you can come up with. On the other hand, just like everything else in this game, it's got a bit of a learning curve. In most games, there are just slots that you fill with whatever you want, but in EVE, fitting is much harder since you have to deal with multiple hard caps and a soft cap. The first of these hard caps are the slots. There are 4 kinds: high, middle, low, and rig. High slots are most often used for weapons. Speaking of which, there's also a limit on how many of each type of weapon a ship can fit. Middle and low slots are a bit harder to label, but rig slots always fit rigs, which modify how other modules on the ship function. The last 2 hard caps are the power grid and the CPU. Each ship has a limited amount of each, and adding modules will eat into these limits. Now for the soft cap, the capacitor. Each ship has a capacity and a recharge rate. Most modules will consume from your capacitor over time. If you run out of capacitor, your ship will shut down. This means that it's important to consider how many modules you want to use at the same time. The fitting screen can tell you how long your ship will last with different combinations of modules being on or off. However, since you don't know what you're doing yet, you might want to use fits made by other players. Luckily, the EVE Uni Wiki has good fits for just about every ship in the game, but when you become more confident, I highly recommend that you start creating your own designs. Once you have a fit you like, save it. This will let you use the extremely useful Buy All and Multi-Fit buttons. Speaking of which, we need to talk about the market.
South on in April of 142!
Money in EVE is called ISK. These days, it's common for MMOs to feature at least a small player-run economy. EVE Online, on the other hand, is the player economy. Pick any item off of the proverbial shelf, and odds are that it was created by another player. That player most likely bought the raw materials off of another player, who himself took a mining ship out into the world and gathered them from an asteroid belt, all the while trying not to get killed by pirates. Now, I am simplifying things a bit, but the point is that EVE Online is a lot like a real economy, with CCP as the government. Although CCP has more power than a real government since they can affect reality itself, and the Federal Reserve can only wish to have that kind of power. The market itself isn't limited to just ships and parts. You can buy all sorts of crazy things like clothes, political activists, slaves, sexy slaves, and Plex. What the hell is Plex, you ask? Plex is EVE Online's premium currency. It isn't just any old premium currency though, it has a very special quality, that being the ability to sell it to other players on the in-game market. This means that through Plex, you can turn real money into ISK, and ISK into Plex, although there's no way to turn Plex back into money. This is cool for a bunch of reasons, my favorite being that you can use Plex to figure out the real money value of ISK. But what gives Plex its value? Well, not only can you use it to buy skins, you can exchange 500 Plex for a month of Omega time. This means that you can have an Omega account without ever having to pay for it. Although the logic behind playing EVE for dozens of hours for your subscription, as opposed to just spending 1 hour at a low-end job for it, is something that you'll have to puzzle out. Anyway, when it comes to where you should shop, you can technically do it anywhere. However, it's best to shop at one of the trade hubs around the galaxy. These are where players most often come together to buy and sell stuff. The largest trade hub is Jita. Unfortunately, Jita has a bit of an infestation, and it's an infestation of scammers. In EVE Online, you're actually allowed to run scams. This can run anywhere from a small-time ISK doubling scheme to infiltrating a corporation, rising through the ranks until you get access to its assets, and stealing them all for yourself. Now that you know all this, you might feel ready to strike out and make your fortune. But there's one last thing you should consider doing first. The Bloodstained Stars Epic Arc. Epic Arcs are the closest thing EVE has to a main quest line. This Epic Arc will take you on a tour around the galaxy, introduce you to some more mechanics, and give you more starting cash. If you enjoy this Epic Arc, the game has more of them, but you'll need an Omega account to be able to play them. Now that you're finally free from tutorials, you need an objective. The closest thing this game has to a goal is to participate in interesting activities, and through them, make as much money as possible. For most people, the best activity is the PvP. Now, unless you're really good at PvP, you're probably going to lose money doing it. This means that you need a day job. Most of the day jobs in EVE can be quite enjoyable, just remember that mining is not one of them. I'm going to cover my 2 favorite day jobs. The first, and my favorite of the 2, is exploration.
I have a question for God. Why?
Exploration is all about traveling the galaxy looking for data and relic sites, and then pillaging them for all they're worth. These sites spawn randomly throughout the galaxy, with the best spawning in the most dangerous systems. So before we can get into exploration proper, let's talk about the most fun subject ever: safety.
This isn't safe or fun!
Every system in EVE has a security rating. This ranges from +1 to -1. Systems with a rating ranging from 0.5 to 1 are called high security space. Naturally, they're the safest. If a player attacks another without provocation, or breaks some other rule, then the invincible and all-powerful Concord will send ships to destroy the aggressor. If a player breaks the rules too much, then Concord will just attack them on sight. However, the lower the security rating, the longer the response time will be. This means that suicide ganking, or killing an innocent player knowing that Concord will kill you after, is a valid strategy. Next is low sec. It includes all the systems with safety ratings ranging from 0.1 to 0.4. These systems don't have Concord, but they do have turrets. While the turrets are pretty strong, they can be avoided by smart players, which means that there may as well be nothing protecting you in these systems. Last is nullsec, which literally doesn't have anything protecting you. You can murder all the players you want, Concord won't care. Nullsec includes every system with a security rating from 0 to -1. Oh, there's also wormhole space, but you'll have to learn that for yourself. I do recommend it though, especially if you enjoy exploring. It can be pretty wild. So why would you ever want to go to a system where you're unsafe? Well, 1, you stopped being safe the second you undocked anyway. But 2, and far more important, is that the lower a system's security rating, the better the loot it'll have. This means that when planning a route, you'll have to decide how much risk you're willing to take for the greater reward. With that understood, let's get back to exploration. The actual act of exploration comes down to 2 mini-games: scanning and hacking. Let's start with scanning. Systems all throughout the galaxy will spawn cosmic signatures. These signatures can be any number of things, so to find out what it's hiding, you have to scan it down. Press Alt-P to open up the scan screen. You scan with probes deployed from your probe launcher. These probes are in a formation, which you can customize. Each one scans everything within a variable distance, represented by a sphere. The smaller the scan distance, the more precise the results you'll get back. This means that you'll want to start scanning with both a wide formation and a large scan range. Once you pick something up, you should slowly shrink both the formation and the range to get more precise data. Depending on how many probes hit the signature symbol might change. If the symbol becomes a sphere, it means that only one probe hit it, and that the signature is somewhere in the sphere. If it becomes a circle, this means that 2 probes have hit the signature, and that it's somewhere in the circle. If you get 2 points connected by a line, then this means that 3 probes have hit the signature, and that it's somewhere near one of the 2 points. Finally, if you manage to get down to a single point, then this means that 4 or more probes have hit the signature, and that it's somewhere near that point. From here, it's just a matter of shrinking your scan range and scanning again until you build up 100% scan strength. As you build scan strength, more information about the signature will become available. Remember, you're looking for data and relic sites. If you find out that the signature is neither of those, stop scanning and start on a new signature. So what do you do when you find a site? Well, now it's time to warp and crack it open. At the site, you'll find containers full of goodies. These containers can go by different names, but they'll always be marked by this icon. Remember, the containers are locked. You have to hack them open to get the loot. To hack at a data site, you use a data analyzer, and at a relic site, you use a relic analyzer. The hacking minigame is sorta like Reverse Minesweeper. There's a board full of nodes. Each one you click reveals a number. This is how many nodes away you are from a surprise. It might be a good surprise, it might be a bad surprise, but you're guaranteed to get something. One of the potential goodies is the core. Your goal is to find and destroy it. To help you do that, you have coherence and strength. Coherence is your health, while strength is how much damage you do. You'll need these to deal with any defensive subsystems you might encounter. Defensive subsystems are the bastards standing between you and making a living. Like you, defensive subsystems also have a coherence and strength. Each time you click on a subsystem, you'll each take your strengths out of the other's coherence. If a subsystem's coherence reaches 0, it leaves the board. If yours reaches 0, then your hacking attempt fails. In most cases, failing twice will destroy the container, and the loot along with it. There are also 2 defensive subsystems that have special effects. These are the really nasty ones. First is the Restoration node. For every move you make after discovering one, another random subsystem will gain coherence. This can bring a subsystem above its starting coherence, so you should destroy restoration nodes as quickly as possible. The other is the virus suppressor. It reduces your strength. The only way to get it back is by destroying the node. However, since your strength has already been lowered, your ability to destroy this subsystem is reduced. This means you should get some help dealing with it, and that's what utility subsystems are for. There are 4 utility subsystems. Self-repair increases your coherence 3 times, once when you activate it, and again for the next 2 moves you make. Kernel Rot takes away half of a defensive subsystem's coherence. Polymorphic Shield makes you immune to damage the next 2 times it would get applied to you. And last, Secondary Vector is applied to a subsystem and deals 20 damage to it 3 times, once when you apply it, and again for the next 2 moves you make. When you finally find the core, destroy it. Just remember that it can deal damage, and to click Loot All before moving on to the next cache. Once you're happy with how much wealth you have in your cargo hold, return to the nearest market hub, sell your loot, and do a Scrooge McDuck dive into all your money. Oh, and try not to get killed by pirates along the way. That would suck. Exploration is both a fun and easy way to make money. The entry-level ships and equipment for it are pretty cheap too. The best entry-level ship is the Caldari Heron. It has the highest scan strength potential since it has the most mid-slots. The endgame of exploration is to get some kind of crazy exploration ship like the Stratios. Naturally, it's extremely expensive, so much so that some people will attack you in it just for kicks. It's also designed with cloaks in mind, something that only an Omega account can use. On top of cloaking, the Stratios also makes a great, if expensive, radar, which happens to be the second day job I'm gonna cover.
Rats, we're rats, we're the rats. We pray at night, we stalk at night, we're the rats.
I'm the giant rat that makes all of the rules.
Let's see what kind of trouble we can get ourselves into.
Ratting is the act of making money by killing NPCs, or rats as the community calls them. The money itself is made from the bounties on the rats and from selling the loot they drop. There are many different kinds of rats, including belt rats, gate rats, and combat site rats. The type of ratting we're going to cover are the combat site rats. Combat sites are found in the same screen you do your scanning in, but you don't have to scan them down. When you arrive at the site, just kill the rats. Usually more waves of rats will come in and join the fight. By the way, don't be surprised if you don't get the bounties immediately. There's a delay between making a kill and actually receiving the bounty. Each combat site has a difficulty rating. The more dangerous the site, the more powerful the rats, and the bigger the bounties. Unfortunately, the game hides the difficulty rating from you. To find out the difficulty rating, you have to cross-reference the site's name with this chart. You can also figure out what type of rats you're going to fight with this chart. Knowing what kind of rats you'll fight is important. You see, there are 4 types of damage in this game, and the 2 types of tank, armor and shields, each have a different level of resistance to them. This means that if you know what kind of rats you're going up against, you can fit your ship to tank their damage, and dish out the damage that they can't resist. While you're out ratting, there's a random chance that you'll encounter an escalation. This will come in the form of a pop-up. If you want to do the escalation, go to the escalation section in the agency which will direct you to a location. Then go there and kill the rats. So that's the basics of ratting, which means that now, regardless of whether you prefer exploration, ratting, or your own crazy way of making money, you should now be financially stable enough to start doing some PvP.
It's all of this, we'll put it right back in its place. When Goyle attack us, we'll give him a smack, we'll slap him right back in the face.
Every topic in EVE Online is big and complicated. The biggest and most complicated of them all is the PvP. If I were to cover the whole topic myself, I'd die of old age before finishing this video. For this reason, I'm only going to show you how to get started, and give you the resources you need to learn the rest. So the type of PvP that I'm going to recommend for you is Faction Warfare. Faction Warfare is a perpetual war waged between an alliance of the Caldari and Damar versus the Gallente and Minmatar. However, it isn't a total war, it has rules and regulations. These rules are what make it great for new players. To participate in Faction Warfare, just go to any station that has both a recruiting station and is controlled by your desired faction and sign up to join the militia. Being a part of a militia means that you can participate in Faction Warfare activities, and freely attack members of the opposing militia without any penalty, even in high-stack space. Then again, they can do the same to you. This means that the galaxy will become a lot more dangerous for you, so here's a trick. Jita, where you'll want to do all your shopping, is always crawling with people who want to kill you, and they're not above using Faction Warfare to do it. To avoid them, make a second character just for shopping. This second character is called a hauling alt. When you want to buy or sell something, transfer your loot and some money to your alt at a safe location. Haul it all to Jita, sell it, buy what you need, haul it back, and finally transfer everything back to your main character. This works because only your character joined the militia, not the whole account, making the alt safer than your faction warfare character. By the way, there are tons of uses for hauling alts outside of faction warfare, so you'll want one no matter what you're doing. Besides, if you're not satisfied with how ugly your main character is, you can make the hauling alt even worse. Anyway, in addition to enemy players causing you trouble, systems controlled by the empires you're fighting against will be hostile to you, meaning that their NPC ships will attack you. Luckily, these ships aren't nearly as powerful as Concords. They can even be ignored if you move quickly. So with the danger out of the way, here's why faction warfare is great. It lets you fight the opposing militia in faction war complexes. Complexes are a nearly sterile PvP arena which boils combat down to just your ship and the enemies. Even better is that most complexes have size restrictions. At novice complexes, the largest ships allowed in are frigates. This is great since frigates are cheap, meaning that when you inevitably lose them by the dozen, you won't feel too much pain to your wallet. So here are 2 tips to help you get the most out of complexes. First is to look for your fights in systems where there's already some fighting going on. This way you won't have to wait ages between fights. You can use the militia ships destroyed in the last hour map mode to figure out where that might be. Then again, a high death system might be the result of a large fleet battle, or a gate camp, so be careful with how you use this. Once you're there, hang out at the novice complex, and maybe announce in local that you're looking for a fight. Hell, after killing you, some people might give you advice. Second is that you don't have to go into a complex blind. Before using the acceleration gate, use your D-scan to see how many ships there are in the complex, and what types of ships they are. Use this information to avoid being outnumbered, or even to pick favorable fights once you learn what each ship does and how to counter it. You can also D-scan from within the complex to see who's coming in. If you see a whole fleet coming your way, then it's time to warp out of there. Now, the real purpose of faction warfare is to fight for territory and to gain loyalty points. These loyalty points can be redeemed for prizes, which you can sell for a profit. This means that if you like faction warfare, you can keep doing it even after you're confident with PvP. In fact, there are whole corporations dedicated to faction warfare. Here's some footage of one.
I'm gonna say the N-word. That's racist! You can't say the N-word!
Oh yeah, the corporations. So after listening to all this, you're either thinking, wow, this game sounds awesome, or wait, that's it? Why would someone waste their time doing this garbage? Well, to the second person, I say this: corporations. These are EVE's version of a guild. EVE isn't a single-player game. It's an MMO for crying out loud. Nearly everything it has to offer is designed with groups in mind. The best way to describe it is like this: EVE is paced a lot like fishing. At its root, you're spending a lot of time performing tasks of low intensity. But, every so often, something big and exciting happens that demands your attention. As soon as it's over, you can celebrate or sulk depending on whether you won or lost, before things become calm again. This pacing kinda sucks when you're alone, but it's great in groups. Groups mean that you can chat while nothing is happening, and then play off of each other's excitement and work together when something finally does. That's not to say you can't fish alone, but if you do, you'd better really like it. Weird analogies aside, I'd really encourage you to join a corporation, and to do so as soon as possible. EVE, more than anything, is a social game. The easiest way to have a bad time is to play it alone. Who knows, you might even make some friends. Actually, you know what? This whole video was a lie. Here's how you really play EVE. Look at this chart. Find something interesting and learn how to do it, usually from the EVE Uni Wiki. If you like what you see, try it out. If you still like it, join a corporation dedicated to it. As soon as you're bored, repeat the process. EVE isn't just one game, it's several dozen. Move from one to the next, and more importantly, make yourself some friends along the way. So yeah, that was EVE Online. Feel free to ask any questions you have in the comments, I'll get back to you pretty quick. Up next is a very special project, and I know you'll love it. I'll see you then.